So today we've got Pinpoint Coaching. We have the lovely Christa Theg with us today. And we are going to talk about one of my favorite areas and one of the things that seemingly has made an impact in Christa when I shared my approach. We're going to talk about being a slave to our business or showing up as a servant and what that means and how it can benefit you in your business and save you both time, money, headache, nightmares, stress, all that good stuff. So
all the above.
with that, since Christa really wanted to talk about this today, I'm going to let her share some insights that she's gained.
Wow. I mean, I think it all really came together more recently than not, if I'm being honest, though, because I think I've always been a slave to work, you know? And when I say like a slave to work, I mean, I'm the one that's constantly, there's no freedom. There's no time limits. I'm constantly nose to the grindstone, never seeing the bigger picture. And while in my mind, I was serving the people I was doing the work for, it was more of I was chained to paperwork, my desk, different aspects of the job and the work. And I really started to notice this when I started working with you, Chad, which, was an amazing insight. And then, whenever you started to bring in the fact that, well, there is a level within the service, and it is very different from the slavery aspect, where you can serve, you can have those good feelings, no matter what area of the job or work you're working in.
Gotcha. So what do you think? I mean, as far as like being slave to your business, being slave to that job, being slave to the work, what do you mean by that when you say slave to it? Like, let's go a little bit deeper into that, because I want people to really understand where you're coming from.
So for me, that effectively means and goes into losing time with my family, feeling that I needed to be more involved with my business to make sure that I was supporting that, and losing time with friends, giving up aspects of my life, whether it be a warm dinner or going out with friends, having that family event going on at the same time as something else in my business, and feeling that I absolutely had to choose the business over, the important things of life, because social, that stuff is very important too. I think I personally forgot that.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like one of the big things with me was to be a slave to something literally means you can't control it anymore. You can't regulate it. You can't have any say on what's going on, really. I mean, that's what it means, is the fact that you have all of your power stripped away. I mean, how many times have you, when you were working for somebody else, have you thought, man, I really need to get this taken care of. I really need to help my family. I really need to go to the doctor. I really need to, something that really had to be done. But your question was, but my boss won't let me.
Yeah.
Like, where in this world have we gotten this conception that we're supposed to like hand over the rights to our life to a complete stranger in exchange for a few dollars here and there? To me, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. To me, in fact, that's absolutely ridiculous. It's a waste of common sense and logic and everything else.
Yeah, that's the crazy part too, though, is so many companies, different places, they offer all of these benefits, and they're like, you should be using these, but for whatever reason, we have this mindset of, oh no, I can't touch those things.
Yeah, and it's because we have this indebted mentality, like somehow because I showed up, I'm now supposed to give you the rest of my life too. That doesn't make any sense to me. So there's a difference between slavery and master and slave versus servanthood and servant. Because when we look at these things, we have to understand that although what we're doing is an act of service, we expect something in return, right? when we go to work, let's just say when I used to work at a grocery store. When I went to work, I used to go in the back and I'd take all the stock from out of the back of the store and I'd bring it out and I'd put it in the right spot, in the right way, in the right order, neatly organized, old to the front, new to the back, proper in and out rotation, all that good jazz. But it was all because of service. I was there to serve the customers who came in.
Yep.
Now, my manager treated us like slaves. He would put unruly requirements, or like, well, you got to do this much this fast and you've got to do it in this way. And I'm like, dude, there's absolutely no way that somebody can actually do all of that throughout an entire grocery store in one shift. And we proved it because I'm fast. I'm efficient in what I do. I find systems that make things faster. I do what's effective. I throw out that which isn't. And I couldn't get half the stuff done that they wanted done. Well, they thought if we put the load big enough, then you'll stay motivated to work harder. Now, the reality was, if you made the load big enough, there'd be a couple people, one guy named Jeff. He would actually look busy in front of the camera, but you'd find him sleeping on a rack outside of the camera's view.
Oh,
He was
wow.
overwhelmed, wouldn't want to do the work, so he'd go hide, sleep it off, come back up, get paid, and he'd actually get promotions and raises because when they reviewed the cameras on the night shift, he was always moving. Every time they saw him, he was just zip, 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 zip. Of course he's zipping. He just spent the last 45 minutes sleeping. He's wide awake.
Yeah. That's
Right?
insane.
Right? But this is what people do. They don't respond positively to an increased workload.
Not at all.
They respond positively to actually getting things done, therefore getting the reward. So how do we get rewarded more effectively in our business? We're now in control of our business. A lot of people are starting their jobs online. They're doing these income streams to supplement their offline job. But all of a sudden they become a slave. Like the promise of 2K a day or 10K in 5 months and all this jazz. And they're thinking, ooh, massive freedom, life freedom. I'm going to sit at the beach like everybody else. But what happens? They're stuck in front of their computer 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because all they're told is just talk to more people, add more people to your friends list, message more people, ask 5 qualifying questions, message more people. But there's no system. There's
It
nothing
doesn't
put
make
in place.
sense.
No. And is it effective? Yeah, absolutely. Of course it is. If you do it right, if you do it consistently, you will get some results. It's just the law of averages. Eventually, you're going to talk to somebody that's going to buy if you talk to enough.
Yeah.
Well, there's better ways. There's more effective ways. That's why you see a Crest ad for toothpaste at the Super Bowl instead of people knocking on your door trying to sell you toothpaste.
That makes sense.
Because there's a better way.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the other way wouldn't work. In fact, if you went door to door, you'd know exactly who needs toothpaste and a breath mint. Right?
And the special mouthwash.
Right. You'd know ahead of time. So the important thing to remember is when we're looking at slavery, servanthood, and master, subservient, we have to look at it from a new perspective in business. And I like to look at it from everything that I do in my life, I do out of service to other people. But in order to be of the greatest level of service, then you actually have to fully encompass the position of a servant.
Can you go into that a little bit? Because that always gets me, that servant piece. And,
Right.
You've explained it to me amazingly on multiple occasions, but it almost sounds counterintuitive in a lot of ways.
It does, because what we have is a society and a culture which has completely twisted things up based on a very, very, very tiny period of time. Of something that happened to people that aren't even here anymore. Maybe there might be one or two that have some recollection, but everybody else is just their warped sense of what they think it should be, or more importantly, what they think it shouldn't be based on what they think it was.
Mm.
So we have this negative connotation around servant. Well, y'all like it when you go to a restaurant and somebody brings you your food? They're
I
called
do.
servers. Why? Because they're servants.
Mm.
They're there to serve you.
Okay.
Now, guarantee smart people are nice to their servers.
Mm.
You know why?
Can't say I
Because the
did.
ones who are rude to their servers, thinking they're going to get something special, usually get a little something special in their food they didn't know about.
Hmm.
Okay?
Have you worked in the food service industry? I haven't.
I have. I have. The ruder, the meaner, the nastier you are, chances are you're going to get a little something extra in your food.
Mm.
You know, it's just the way it is. And it doesn't matter if you're talking high-end restaurant or low-end restaurant. I've seen it happen in both.
Wow.
Okay? So it doesn't really matter. But the reality is, if we treat those who serve us well, they will go out of their way to serve us greater.
That makes sense.
We had an amazing couple of servers at just a local family restaurant, and they were Albanian, two sisters and a brother. Actually, there were three of them. They all did an amazing job. And the coolest thing is when we went in there the first time, I felt like I ran into somebody from high school, right? She walked over and she plopped down in the chair next to me and she talked to me for 4 or 5 minutes. She goes, "Oh yeah, do you want something to drink?" And I'm like, "Yeah, heck yeah, coffee." I said, "I will always have coffee." You know what? She didn't even write it down, but she logged it. The next time I went to the restaurant, I walked in the door and she waves from halfway across the restaurant over everybody else on a Sunday morning. She's like, "Hey, Chad. Hey." She goes, "I'll get your coffee right over here." It had been over a month.
Wow.
And I went over and I sat down and she came by it. I never once had to ask for a refill. In fact, I told her, could you let me drink a little bit more of this? It's staying too hot. I would take a sip and she'd come by. She had this understanding that if I serve him really well, he'll treat me really well. And I did. And then her sister came over and she started to serve me well. And then a guy came over, probably 3-4 weeks later, young kid. He came over and he cleared off the table, and he was really helpful and he was very kind. And I found out that was the little brother. Next thing you know, I knew their dad, and their dad would come over and sit down at the restaurant. We frequented that restaurant for multiple years. They sold their restaurant, moved all the way down to Florida. Those servers are still sending messages and saying hello to our children.
Wow.
Because they understood that to be a servant helps me. But when they help me, I begin to see them as valued friends. And they became a part of our family. And I look at this like the area of a butler. Okay. And this is how I've explained it to you. And I think it's a really good picture is we have these pictures of these old English butlers. Yes, sir. How can I serve you, sir? Absolutely, sir. And we think they're this weak individual, but the reality is the entire house, the entire staff, everything that happens within that house, the organization, the planning, the scheduling, the food, the ingredients, the grocery shopping, everything goes through that butler, right? They're like the head of the house. They control it all. They know the power that they wield within that home. And yet, they show up and do nothing but what elevates the master of the house. Not because he's less than the master of the house, but because he has intentionally taken on the role of a servant because the master couldn't do it without him.
I like that.
See, the master couldn't run the house. If the master could run the house, get his clothes pressed, take care of the staff, make sure everybody was there, pay the bills that needed to be paid, do all of this stuff, he probably wouldn't need the butler, right?
You'd think, yeah.
The butler knows his position and he knows the value of the position. So when we enter into the business space in that same understanding of, I know my value and I know how much they're depending on me to serve them at my highest capacity, you can't help but elevate that person. And when you are there to elevate someone else, here's a secret. They will never be far from where you are because you're holding them up.
Now, can I ask you something, Chad? You mentioned something like really important, like knowing our self-worth.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's something that can really keep us in a position of slavery versus being a servant? Like that just kind of struck me.
Okay. But here's something. Here's the difference. I said know your worth,
Yeah.
know your value,
Mhm.
right? Doesn't have to be your self value,
Oh,
your
okay.
self worth. People aren't buying my self worth if I'm helping them with their business.
Right. But what if in business you don't know your value then to
Well,
extend that then?
then you should probably reach out and talk to me. I can square that away quick. Right? Okay.
Right.
So the reality is this: people try and wrap themselves up
Mhm.
as the value that they bring into the world. Now, it's important to know that you are the very thing that makes what you know valuable,
Mm.
but not because your value is measured by what you have. What you have becomes valuable because of who you are.
Gotcha. And when we present that from a place of service, ultimately,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where we need to be.
See, and this is where that magic shift happens. Is first we have to understand that what makes things valuable in the world
Mhm.
is whether or not it's a commodity or something that's restricted. Like, people want to argue this one way or the other, but the fact is diamonds are not that rare. The availability of diamonds is very limited.
Mm.
Therefore, the price is high. So we have a high demand and a low supply, and the price will go up. And then there's perceived value. It's nothing but a hard rock. Okay.
Be careful who you say that to.
Yeah. I'm just saying, it's the truth.
Yeah.
And if you're a jeweler, you're like, oh no, there's finer details. Great. Then the next time that somebody shows up with an electronic meter and some big old magnifying glass to look at the ring and find out if it's a real diamond or if it's just pretty, like the other diamond ring, I'll be sure to give them a call. But the reality is the value is whatever we place upon something. And it's usually placed based on its rarity. The more rare something is, the more value it becomes in society. Now, here's the cool thing. There's a better chance of you walking out in the middle of the winter with a blowtorch in your hand and picking up two identical snowflakes than for anybody to find another person just like you.
Wow.
There is no one anywhere ever in time that is equal to or just like you, which means you are the most valuable, rare, precious ruby in existence. To infinity, infinitum and beyond, or infinity and beyond. I think that was Buzz Lightyear's thing. To infinity and beyond. Anyway, side note. So when we look at it and we say, okay, if my uniqueness is what makes me innately valuable, then that uniqueness applied to the information that everybody else already has, because we're in a free information society, it's my experience and my perspective that makes that information now super valuable, because no one will ever see it or present it in the way that I do. And therefore, what you have is extremely valuable to the marketplace.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that we have to be above someone else. In fact, the strongest position will be holding someone else up. Let me ask you a question. It's going to sound funny, but what has the better ability to safeguard you in a tornado? A house or the foundation firmly planted in the ground that the house is built on?
I would say probably the foundation if I had to take a guess.
Yeah, because chances are that hurricane, that tornado, that whatever, the gale force winds can rip your entire house straight from the ground.
Yep.
But there's a better chance that it will survive if it's firmly secured to the foundation. And I've seen houses ripped right off the top of the floor, like house gone, carpet left.
Really?
Really kind of cool. Why? Because the foundation and the footing, the actual flooring itself was secured so well, it went nowhere. But the walls were secured so poorly to the floor, it ripped the entire house off the top.
Wow.
Now, it would have been the perfect picture if it like left some furniture, but that was gone too.
Right.
But it did leave the carpet. And I was like, that's the true foundation, is that which supports something always must be stronger than that which it supports.
Well, that's powerful on so many levels right there.
Yeah. Because how can my team expect me to carry them unless I have the strength to carry us all?
Yeah, that is true.
How can I pick you up and take you to the top of the hill if I couldn't carry myself? I have to be able to carry myself and you to get you to the top.
Right.
Now, we used to do this in the service. They were battle buddy drills, because we'd throw each other up on a shoulder, fireman's carry, and we would run 100 yards across the field. And then we would put him down, and then we would swap places, and they would pick me up, and they would run me to the other side of the field. I absolutely loved it when I got teamed up with Pavik. He was like 148 pounds soaking wet. I was 235. He didn't like those exercises too much. And it's like, hey, you can complain about the exercise, or you can know this. If you ever need to be carried, I got you. He's like, all right, man. Cool. I was like, you got me? He goes, no, I'll get Radke. You know? I'm like, all right, well, at least we've got a backup, right?
Right.
But the reality is, if we learn how to lift other people up, they can't go beyond where we are, because we're always connected. So the higher I can lift you, the higher I go.
Mm.
So servanthood doesn't put us less than. It puts us under. It doesn't make me less than someone. It just places me under them so that I can better position myself to raise them to new heights. Is that what you're doing with your clients? If you're not, as we love saying in the industry, you're leaving money on the table, right? Yeah. Because if we're not lifting them up, if we're not helping them achieve their goals, if we're not pushing them forward, if we're not helping them rise new heights, what do they need us for? They won't.
Right.
If they're not gaining new ground, reaching new pinnacles, reaching new heights, breaking new ceilings, then they'll go find somebody else who can get them those things. Now, it doesn't mean that we're there to do the work for them.
Mm.
Okay? See, if I'm behind,
this is where I get stuck.
Yeah, see, I can be behind you and I can push you forward, right?
Yep.
Or I can be behind you and kick you square in a can. Either way, I'm going to motivate you forward.
Right.
Doesn't mean I have to do the work for you, but it means I'm going to show you what needs to be done. And if you need it, I'll give you a little push. I'll give you some support. And if you really need it, I'm going to back up and give you a good swift kick. Motivate you. Right?
That may or may not be a true story that's happened a couple times, but hey.
Right? But I'm not going to stand behind you and just kick you all day long.
Yeah.
That's a slave driver.
Mm.
That's not my job. My job isn't to keep you moving forward. My job is to remind you what's ahead that you desire, so that you'll persevere and get to it. That you'll do the work because it's what you want, not because I kicked you in the butt. And that's the goal when we're working with people. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're writing copy, whether or not you're doing graphics, singing for somebody's birthday at a live singing telegram. It doesn't matter. Are you willing to lower your pride, place yourself underneath someone else so that you can raise them up? If you're willing to do that, then you will always have a position, a foundation, if you will, to build a strong business relationship with somebody. The greatest position that I have ever led from is a position of a servant. It's not slavery. I can walk away at any time. I can hang up on you. I can close off the call. I can hit end live right now. Just click, done. Right? Yep. It doesn't control you. It's a position of choice. We have a problem of slavery when we step into a role that we can't walk out of.
Okay. So it's like getting in a cage and locking the door and throwing the key back out. Is that how that looks?
Yeah. It's like stopping over, throwing on some shackles, and then blaming the other guy for enslaving you.
Hmm.
That's ridiculous. It's like the other guy didn't want any slaves. He doesn't have any slaves. But you want to claim what? That you're oppressed? Well, then don't be there.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you then?
Pick your happy butt up and go do something, right?
Right. In that case, though, how can we like shift that mentality? Like, I know for me, for a really long time, unknowingly, I was taking on that slave mentality. What's a way that we can like shift that if we find ourselves falling into it? Whether it be, out of like, let's say you have that client that you absolutely love, but you find you're becoming more slave than servant. What's a good defining way to say, whoa, okay, I need to check myself and make sure I'm approaching this from the appropriate place of service?
It's always a lot simpler than people want to give it credit for, right? We always want to overcomplicate things because it justifies us feeling like we're stuck there.
Yeah.
If you're ever doing something that you feel like you have to do, stop.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what I said. Just stop. If you can't stop, then you're a slave to it, and what you should do is stop.
Okay.
If you're in a position with a client and you're serving them, but it feels like they're wearing you out, they're draining you, that you're there because that you have to be there at their beck and call, blah 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 blah. Okay, then one of two things needs to happen. You need to fire them, or you need to quit that job. Period. Like, don't put yourself in that position because that's a position that you stepped into. Oftentimes I'll do, well, you know me. I like doing things that are really big, way beyond what anybody expected. And somebody goes, "Oh, you didn't have to do that." My answer is always the same. I know. If I did, I wouldn't have.
Mm.
If there's anything that I have to do, I won't. That's
Okay.
how you step out of that victim slavery mentality. But what you'll find is most of the things that we associate as victimhood or slavery to something are entirely within our control to change.
I never thought about it. Now that I am. Oh boy.
You see, we don't, it's been a long time in this country since we've actually had slaves. Period. Yet people are still walking around feeling oppressed by slavery. What's your problem? Well, you don't understand. You're white. Well, you don't understand. There were just as many or more white slaves as there were of any other color. And it wasn't black. It was black, Asian, Irish, Native American, indigenous, whatever words you want to use. It wasn't one race. It wasn't one nationality. It wasn't one specific genetic gene of people. It was people were enslaved by force. Nobody is forcing you to be a slave right now. Well, I'm a slave to my job. I have to work. You don't have to work there.
Yeah.
That's not slavery.
That just makes it too simple.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was forced into slavery. All right. Are you still being forced into slavery right now? Okay. Well, that's illegal. Go seek help. Stop complaining. And I could easily say that because if they were telling me that, that means they have the ability to reach out and ask for help from legal sources that can actually do something about it.
Right.
And now we could get off topic on this real easy, but the mentality of slavery means we accepted what someone else imposed upon us. Now you're a slave. but an acceptance of position that we've chosen can be simply called servitude, to become a servant. Because you know what? It's amazing. I don't have very many enemies anywhere in the world because I live my life as a servant to others.
Wow.
And when you do that, people want to be in your space. They want to be around you. You and I actually did a training talking about intention and being intentional about what we do.
Yep.
Had somebody come into our program this morning after a call with me, and they said, really, that was the video right there. He says, because I saw who you were and how you presented things, and just the fact that you genuinely just cared.
Mm.
No sales, no marketing. We just showed up and said, be intentional about what you do and place other people first. It's missing in the world today.
It
And when
really
you
is.
become that person, you become not a commodity, but a rarity, a
Mhm.
gem. So simply by doing it different than everybody else around you automatically makes you more valuable. I'll say that again, because that's important to know.
Please, yeah.
Just doing life differently, doing business differently, doing conversation differently automatically increases the value of what you bring into the marketplace. And it automatically increases your value in the marketplace because you are no longer a commodity, a rarity. And if you hold on to that in everything that you do, you'll find out life isn't going to look the same anymore because things are going to change. People are going to change. People are going to see things different. They're going to show up different when they talk with you. They're going to see what you say as different. Why? Because it's different. You're not like everybody else. And that's what makes what you have memorable, valuable, invaluable, if you want to look at it that way. It's the power of what you do is changed by how you go about doing it. And if you're not doing it uniquely, you just sound like everybody else. You know what I mean?
Which is crazy too. I've been seeing a lot of talk about competition and stuff lately, and how some people argue there is no competition, there is competition. But based on what you're saying here, the minute you become your unique and authentic self, you're the only one that's you. So any competition that could have existed doesn't.
Yeah, and I like telling people that. Some people think I'm joking, but I'm serious. I have no competition. There is nobody online that can even come close. They can't hold a candle to what I do. Why? Because nobody does what I do. I know that, and therefore my confidence exudes that. That's why I have no problem charging the prices that I do for some of my programs, because I know there is no other place in the world that you can get what I'm going to give you.
Yep.
And certainly not in the way that I'm going to give it to you, or as simply understood as the way that I share it. Because I am me. I am unique and beautiful and creative and wonderfully made. Just like you. Just like every other person who's listening right now, you are uniquely crafted for a purpose. And when you walk within the purpose that you were created for, the world will come out of everywhere to add value back to you, because we live in a value exchange system. If you give the greatest value, you'll receive the greatest value in return. So don't go halfway. Don't limit yourself. You were created for a reason. And that reason, I believe, is to be a servant to all. Yeah.
Well, you got me silent. You're so good at this, Chad. I could just, you could have done this whole thing as a whole speech, and I didn't have to talk once.
Well, you mentioned you were having your day today and you were feeling a little tired. So that's what team's for. And that's what it looks like when you support someone else. They're having a low energy day, you show up, you give extra. Just like it was going on with me the other day. I was having a rough day, and you showed up and you gave extra. You gave more than just business conversation. It was in ear. And that was taking on that servant role. You may not have noticed it at that moment, but I knew what role you stepped into, and it's what held me up so that I could see things in a different light and different perspective. And that's what we need to do in everything that we do in our life, in our personal lives, in our friendships, in our business roles, in your community efforts, your community groups, clubs. If you go to the gym, take some time out of your day, double, triple, and quadruple mask up so you look like a complete fool, but go spot somebody. Go help them. If you see somebody's just about out of water, offer to go get them a bottle of water. Offer to go refill their bottle at the fountain for them. They'll probably freak out thinking that you're a zombie these days, but it's okay. At least they'll know you're a nice zombie.
Right.
So, just so everybody knows, if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead, like it, comment on it, share it around. We are going to be transferring over and doing all of our pinpoint coaching right here on this channel so that you can benefit and view and share with us and grow as we go. With that, we just want to say thank you. Christa, did you have any parting words of wisdom for the crew?
Oh my, I think just remember what it means to be a servant and what service really means. And, if you find yourself in that slave mentality, just know that you can get yourself out of it.
Yeah. Just simply make a choice. All right. With that, you guys enjoy. Remember, be a servant to all, a slave to nothing in your life, and you'll be sure to realize a greater level of power every day. There's beauty and grace within you. Now go and share that greatness with the world today.